Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening at the Gnomon School of Visual Effects here in Hollywood for our behind-the-scenes look at the epic Shadow of War live-action interactive film. We're honored to have the director of the film here, Neil Huxley, along with head of CG at the moving picture company, Victoria Osborn, both here with us tonight to walk us through the incredible work that went into this ambitious film. So tonight's event is going to be very conversational, very casual. There's going to be lots of cool visuals that Neil and Vicky will be sharing with us. It's going to be lots of fun. Our moderator, hiding over here to the side, is Ray Cuevas, who's our admissions recruiter here at Gnomon too. So he'll be taking the event from just a minute. We'll be drawing 3 lucky winners from tonight's audience to win a goodie bag, which is courtesy of MPC, which is on its way, I believe, in a car somewhere, battling the traffic. So on that note, I'd like to thank everyone at Ruffian Films and MPC who've helped us bring this event together and live stream it for you all tonight as well. If you are joining us on live stream and Facebook Live, please talk to us throughout the event. We'll be on live chat shortly, and you can tweet to us using #Gnomon too. I'd also like to take a moment to thank our event sponsor, Lenovo, for helping us to bring these free educational events to you. Tonight's presentation is powered by Lenovo and Intel technology, which our students also use here on campus. So I'd like to welcome Gnomon founder Alex Alvarez up to the stage now, who's going to officially open tonight's event.
Hey, everybody. Hey. I'm just going to talk for a brief second. I just wanted to, thank Victoria and Neil for coming. Neil and I actually met at a Gnomon event 9 years ago. I mean, it's crazy. It's been that long. We did a big Avatar event here, which was like a full Saturday. It was really cool. And Neil and I had both worked on the film, but hadn't met. And then after the event, a bunch of people got together at Cat and Fiddle, which unfortunately is, well, it's around, but they moved to a tiny location. But it used to be a place where all Gnomon students would go and grab a drink. And it was really cool, and that's where we met. And we've become friends over the years, and seen Neil do his transition from motion graphics and art directing into saying he wanted to get into directing, and then, like, holy shit, really getting into directing. And doing just amazing work through, the work that he was doing at Mothership and now with Ruffian, and this, cinematic for, or trailer rather, for a game that I've actually played a ton, and my son and I are playing the game right now. I'm only level 26, he's 57. But anyway, it's just such an amazing piece of work that you guys did, and it's just awesome to see a friend have so much success. So hats off to you, Neil, and look forward to what you guys are going to show tonight. And thank you, everybody, for coming. So.
Thanks, mate.
All right. Great introduction. Like Lynette said, this is going to be a very conversational event. I'm just going to give some talking points and guide the conversation along. And I'm really super excited. I'm a huge fan of your work, Neil. I'm a huge fan of Lord of the Rings, as well as the work of MPC. So just to get started, Neil, other than Peter Jackson, you are the only other director to have worked on Tolkien adaptation. How does that feel?
I haven't really given it too much thought. I certainly didn't give it too much thought before going into it. Something like that could really put the fear into you a little bit. But no, it was just a lot of excitement. There's still so much excitement attached to this project. There was going into it, and there still is now, even when I watch it, and I've watched it a lot of times now. No, it's an incredible honor to be part of this IP, this universe, and it certainly wasn't one I was going to screw up.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot behind it, right? There's a lot of
just a little bit.
Just a little bit. So, how did you end up getting attached to this project?
In short, my boss at Ruffian gave me a call one afternoon and said, "We have a project that you might be interested in." Without sort of going into too much detail, the agency were already speaking to a number of high-profile directors about this job, and many of their approaches were pushing the envelope a little bit too far as budget was concerned. So the producer, who was a guy called Ben Latimer, who is a very good friend of my boss, Robert Herman, said to Robert, do you have an option for us that perhaps hits the number and perhaps gives us an approach that is doable? So I got this PDF that was under password protect and opened it up and knew immediately what it was, because I was such a huge fan of the first game. So it's kind of one of those moments where you have to sort of pinch yourself. And they had it was under a code name at the time, so I'm thinking, man, this fucking looks like Shadow of War, but they're calling it Kraken? Why, have they changed the name of the game or something? I just didn't put two, I was so excited I didn't put 2 and 2 together. It was, it was the code word for the game. So I started reading it, and it was one of those things that felt incredibly natural, and I knew exactly how I would do this if I was given the shot. So we put a pitch together, a treatment, and my boss kept saying to me, he's like, we are very much an outside horse in this race. Don't get your hopes up. And I don't think you can help it, you know, really. So, you know, I got my hopes up, and it's, we were still, you know, I got on the phone and pitched to the agency, and it went really well. And submitted a treatment, and we went from outside horse to leader in the race. And then I remember sitting in the lounge at LAX, about to fly back to the UK, and I got a phone call saying that I should resign at my current position where I was working, and that we are about to start this project. So it was a long process, and it was one that you start off being extremely excited, and then you get your hopes up, and then they come back. It was a roller coaster. It really was, of emotion. So to actually end up finally working on it was a bit kind of like a dream come true, to be honest.
That's crazy awesome. And so I kind of wonder, what was different from the treatment that you proposed to what may have been maybe other treatments that other directors?
Yeah, I'm not kind of sure what their approach was, to be honest. Like in great detail, I knew that some of the guys were wanting to use a lot of heavy CG, and I think there is a keenness to use that these days. I'm a huge fan of it, just when it's used correctly and done in the right way. So I'd always thought that Fellowship of the Ring still looks amazing today.
It does,
and
yeah.
I think one of those reasons is because a lot of those orcs, I think all the orcs are in camera. One of the big things about this game was they wanted the audience to be able to emotionally connect with these creatures. And I think that's incredibly tough to do in CG these days. I mean, God knows how you would do it on a commercial schedule. I have no idea how you'd even get there, even close. So, you know, you can see it in some movies. Some movies hit it on the mark, and then some movies we go and see, and the digi-double doesn't quite look real. You know, it's that uncanny valley thing. And you know, orcs are very humanoid. I think there would be a danger of doing these guys in CG. And I really wanted to get up close and personal to them. So I said, look, you know, if we get one of these, I think I had a list of like 5 guys in the world that do, you know, high quality level prosthetics. If we get one of these guys, then we can pull this off. So So that's what we did, and we phoned around, and most of everyone was working on Game of Thrones or Star Wars or something like that, but luckily Rock here and his team at Unreal, who had worked on The Hobbit, were available.
That's awesome.
And I think some of Rohir's work was replaced by CG in the Hobbit films. So I think this was his chance to show what they could do, really. You know,
Right.
So I knew if I could get Rohir, we would have, really a good chance of doing this justice. You know, but he was just one of many people in the team that did amazing work on this. But yeah, that was, I think the practical approach to the orcs was kind of the thing that sort of swung it. And then it was also a lot to do with my boss and Ruffian looking for a production solution somewhere in the world which would work as Mordor,
Right.
that would be cheap enough to go to shoot. And we ended up in the arse end of Ukraine in the middle of winter.
And I'm going to want to dive into more of that part in just a minute, because that's pretty crazy. But before we hit that, I want to know more about kind of your process in assembling the team that you eventually took, with you to Ukraine.
Yeah, should we show the spot first?
Actually,
Yeah.
let's start with that.
I think we're going to show this through with one of the extensions. Yep.
Don't leave me here! Face me, talk! Save me, master! The Ranger wants to play, does he?
You've proven yourself valuable. How would you serve me?
Make me your spy. I like to be fiendish.
May the shadows be your friend. Don't forget to return from them.
I'll return, master, with all sorts of secrets for you.
Cool.
Very cool.
And now we're just going to show the Slay Your Nemesis extension.
Yeah. Just gonna go to
won't forget this, man Phil! Hello, Ranger!
I thought I killed you, Noruk.
Ought to die so easy, mugget! I won't forget this. Traitor! I'm gonna kill you dead! Cross! I'll be back for you, swine! Your flames couldn't finish me, filthy Ranger. And they won't be able to protect you, either.
The next 4 slides after that.
Cool.
The production value in these are incredible. And so how did you go about just getting that team together, you know, getting them all the way up to Ukraine and getting to this?
So, I mean, really, putting the team together, I always knew there was some key people that I knew in the industry. So we knew that Rohir was available. Once the job, basically you get all the people, the players in place during the whole bidding, pitching phase, and then you're basically waiting for that call. And then once you get the call, you pray to God that nobody in that team got booked up whilst you were waiting for that call to come in.
Right.
So then you're ringing around everybody, right, let's go, everyone, you book everybody, you book them for the dates that you need them for, and then off you go. And a lot of these, I already had a pre-existing relationship with a guy called Nick McKinless, who was the stunt coordinator, second unit action director on this. Nick is probably one of the best stunt coordinators in the world that I know, purely because he loves sort of brutal savagery in his choreography, and that's kind of what I needed for this. I didn't want any wire work and fancy kung fu moves. It was supposed to feel dirty and brutal, so that was why Nick was chosen. We had Rohir. My boss knew of a guy called Martin Petch, who was in Prague. Martin put together all of our costumes and armor, a lot of the key costumes and armor, and then we had some people in Ukraine doing secondary armor and costumes as well. So it was through contacts of mine and contacts of ruffians that we kind of put this team together. And then I think the job awarded and by the way, I always wanted to work with MPC as well, as far as the VFX side of things were concerned. So that was another huge part of it. And we were all ready to go as soon as we got the call. So, which we got, I think it was mid-November.
It was a long time ago.
I think, and then I flew to Ukraine after London pretty much immediately.
Wow.
So I think I was in Ukraine in total for 6 weeks, 7 weeks, something like that. It's all a bit of a blur now, to be perfectly honest. I just remember it being bloody cold.
Yeah, and so why was that location chosen?
Well, because there was a number of reasons. There was the cost. There was also the fact that they had this amazing fortress down in Odessa, and I wanted to shoot a bunch of this as much in camera as I could get, and use CG to extend the world. So, yeah, you know, that fortress had a lot to do with it as well. And Ukraine, I mean, everyone used to, I think a few years ago, Prague was the place to go shoot in Europe. That was still quite competitive price-wise, and I think they've gotten a little bit expensive these days, and now Ukraine's the place to go. So there's always somewhere in Eastern Europe that's kind of the place to go and shoot right now if you want to do something that's really ambitious, and you're a little bit budgetarily constrained. But yeah, I can talk you through a few slides if that's cool.
Absolutely, please.
You know, one of the first things we do, or the first things I did on this was elicit the help of my storyboard artist, Mr. Richard Poulain, who's sitting in the audience. And me and Richard work together on all of the stuff that I do, if I can get him. Because he's amazing. Richard has such a great sense of action and camera, and he puts so much energy into his boards that I just think he does beautiful work. So this is just some of the boards that Richard did for the main part of the spot. The extensions, I think, I didn't put in this slideshow. So you can see, you know, this was how we blocked it out. I sit with Richard for days on end in his apartment in Hollywood, and we sit there and he scribbles down my thoughts, and I go away, and then these amazing things pop up in my inbox, in my email inbox, and this is what they look like. So yeah, that's
Wow. Let's give a round of applause to Richard.
Yeah,
Amazing work.
Yeah, beautiful stuff. And then, you know, once you get the boards approved, you go through that process. You usually make a boardomatic or something like that.
Right.
While all this is going on, Vicky and her team are furiously ingesting massive amounts of
Orc models
and game assets, basically, and trying to sort out which ones we're going to use and which ones are going to work for this, and animation cycles and all the rest of it. So I always thought that it would be a great idea if we could use some of those animation cycles in the previs, because that's, you know, previs is one of those things that it's kind of a little bit, it becomes a bit redundant. You put all this work into this thing, and you end up throwing most of it away at the end of it. And I just thought that it would be really cool if some of that stuff could be kept. Was any of it kept?
Yeah, some of it was, and
Cool.
actually it was so useful on set to have. I don't think we ever could have planned a lot of those sort of choreography shots out with the creatures otherwise, you know, so it's always worth it. I don't think it would have looked quite so rich without the animation cycles from the game, though.
Yeah.
So it's really quite detailed, I think, for the sort of time we had. And you can see how it evolved, you know, a lot of the stuff didn't make it into the final spot, but a lot of it, it's almost the same shot, you know?
Yeah, it's again, you know, as you guys are fully aware with filmmaking, things change and you have to adapt them. When you're storyboarding, when you get into previs, it changes from the storyboards. When you take the previs and then you're on set and you're trying to pull this shot off in a real life situation at a real fortress down in Odessa, things don't quite go according to plan sometimes, and sometimes they go even better than what you imagined. So that's why the previs looks in places different, but then some of it looks...
Some of it's almost the same, and I think the bits that differ the most are the exterior fortress at the beginning, because the location was just, you had to change your plan to make the most of the real fortress that was there, and I think it's actually better for it.
Yeah, for sure. Could you get it on the next slide, please?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and this was, I remember us being on set And I took a photo of the fortress, and I knew that would kind of be our opening shot. We were down on the beach, and it was the Black Sea was completely frozen over, and I took took this photo on my iPhone, and I gave it to Vicky. And Vicky and her team did an amazing paint over. Is that?
Yeah, I think it's the next one on here as well.
So I'll show you that I've got the iPhone shot at a later slide, but this is kind of the paint over that you guys did. And I knew once I saw this, it got me really excited, and I thought, you know, it was gonna work, you know. So
I think we need to skip back.
okay. So that's storyboards, then previs.
Sorry,
That's all right.
just trying to get to your production ones.
Oh, it's the casting. That's
22.
right.
Yep.
So I was in London at the time. This was before we went to Ukraine again. We decided to cast in London. Not only did Talion have to be English speaking, but some of the orcs had lines. The main orcs all had lines. And for some reason in this game, they're all speaking like I do, with a Cockney accent. Not sure why that is. They're all of the orcs come from South London or something in Mordor. But so I thought, what better place to cast this than London, really? So casting was really interesting. I've never done a casting like this before, where we literally had guys the size of houses walking through the door, and their direction was to pretty much act like an animal with this axe. I wish I could show you some of those videos, because we would just be sat there in casting with our mouths open, just as these people were just screaming at the top of their heads, blue murder. Yeah. So that was really interesting. And then through Nick, because Nick was with us during the casting, my stunt guy, my stunt coordinator, he knew that what I wanted to do with the part Talion, that usually in movies you have a lead actor and then you have a stunt double, okay? I didn't want to do that with this. I thought, wouldn't it be really cool if we got a stunt guy that could act? Because there isn't a lot of dialogue. Get a stunt guy that acts that looks like Talion, and then I won't have to cut during my fight sequences. You know, that was something that, especially because it's like that. I mean, the video game's like that in a way. There's no cutting away from Talion. Talion's performing the moves. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could find somebody like that? And then this guy walks in. There's a great decapitation.
He's got moves.
Yeah, Ash.
Only slightly out of breath.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine going from watching a bunch of untrained people with swords, and then this guy walks in, who's clearly done his homework. Nick told me he was good. I just didn't realise he'd be as good as this. He didn't only look like Talion. He's obviously a fan of the game, because some of those moves he's performing in the audition are from the previous
From the
game.
previous game, yeah, I noticed that, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, this guy I was like, how do we book him? I want to book him now, you know. Because there was another guy that I saw that was, you know, just as equipped as far as martial arts skills go, but he looked nothing like him. So I was thinking, well, I can't use him because I'm going to have to cut to an actor that's going to look like Italian, and I'm back in that territory that I don't want to be in. It was kind of Ash, or I would have to rethink my approach to the whole film. So when you find people like that, you do want to book them immediately, but unfortunately it just doesn't work that way. You have to get approvals and things like that. But Ash had been doing martial arts since the age of 5. If you look at his Instagram feed, it's just, there's stuff of him doing flips and tricks, and he's a real-life ninja, you know. I'd never met a real-life ninja until I met Ash. So it was great knowing that this guy was available. There was another guy who played Darth Vader in Rogue One, who ended up playing Noruk in this, guy called Spencer Wilding, who is 6'7".
At least.
I think he's 6'7" or something like that. And he was, again, another amazing audition. So we started collecting this ragtag bag of rogues from London. We ended up with about 5 or 6 of them before we headed out to Ukraine. So that was casting. And again, whilst casting is going on, I'm also approving orc designs as well as costumes and everything. So when you're making something on this scale, especially on a commercial schedule, I'm sure this happens on movies as well, but it's like being fired out of a cannon. You don't really get time to think about a lot of things because there's so much coming at you on a daily basis. So whilst I was in casting, I was getting these sent from Rohir. He was in Amsterdam, and they were taking game models or taking the game assets, some of the characters that Monolith had supplied. And it was mine and Rohir's idea to take those game designs and make them look real, because game designs work great in a game, but they don't work in real life, especially when you've got an actor underneath the prosthetics and things like that, because if you put a game model in front of a humanoid, in front of even a skeleton, the game model's eyes are like too far apart, or just the proportions are really different. So this guy called Daniel Carrasco, who works at Rohir's company, was sending me through these incredible orc designs, and I love them all. So then we chose the ones that we liked, and then they started sculpting. They'd obviously, once we cast the actors, they then took life casts of our 5 leads. Charlie played Mog, and so then they start building up this clay rendering of Mog on top of Charlie's likeness. And I remember getting sent this frame, this one on the left, and it was on my phone, and it just looked so cool. It looked like Mog was asleep, and I was going to wake him up in about 5 weeks to do some work, you know. I was so impressed with the work that Rohir was doing and his team. He sent me a couple of really cool videos of them working on this stuff behind the scenes. And you know, for someone like me, who's a huge fan of this type of work, I think if I wasn't directing, I'd have to be making monsters at a shop in North Hollywood somewhere, breathing in toxic fumes every day or something like that. But, you know, being such a fan of this type of project, these types of films, getting these sorts of emails were crazy, you know. because it was like, fuck, this is kind of, we're making something
happening,
like
yeah.
this. You know, like it was very surreal. It was a really bizarre experience, I can tell you. And then I'm approving things like teeth and, you know, then Rohir starts spraying these guys up and painting them.
Allow me your side to crush the life out of any stinking scab that dares stand in our path.
This might be a nice feature, you know, if there's like one of the choices dark.
Promote me to Overlord. These walls will forever tower over the corpses of our enemies.
Or maybe, you know,
I think he's got a hairball.
That is so great.
But that was the first time, literally, I'd seen Charlie in full makeup, with the teeth in, the contacts, and that's Charlie's voice. That's not Charlie. That's how he speaks. That was one of the reasons why we cast him. He has this phenomenal. He's the biggest softie you'll ever meet in your life.
Yeah.
But has this voice that will just, you know, scare you to death. But so that was, again, you know, we would turn up. That was at like 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. Charlie had just gone through 3-4 hours of makeup before we were going to go on set. So that was crazy to see all of those elements working on the actor together at the same time.
Right.
And seeing the performance come through the prosthetic, which...
Yeah, there's a lot of emotion that's just showing.
Yeah,
through
you
that.
kind of breathe a sigh of relief. I mean, I always knew that Rohir would do it. I just didn't quite know what it would look and sound like until you see it. Do you know what I mean? And then when you see it, you're like, fuck, this is incredible, you know? I mean, I remember walking in on Spencer as they were putting Spencer's makeup on, and Spencer would transform as soon as they started. He was standing in the middle of the makeup tent with his arms out and his eyes closed, and they're like painting his nails and his hair, and he looks like Noruk, you know. And I said, "Morning, Spence, how's it going?" And he looked at me and he just went. Spencer was no longer there, you know. It was Noruk. So that was so cool. And so then again, whilst I'm approving prosthetics and orc designs, we're getting designs. We're sending the game designs to Prague, where they're starting to make swords, Italian swords, and some of the orc weaponry. This was quite funny. So the orc weapons in the game, they started printing them. So the hero ones we had made, and for the armies of orcs that we were going to have on set, we couldn't hand make every single sword or you know, weapon. So I was like, let's print them. I mean, we got to be able to print this stuff. It's going to save so much time. So I'm glad they didn't print 500 until I saw these, because these look slightly too big. If you give a weapon that's that scale to one of our actors, it's going to make my orcs feel really small. So we had to make them 20% smaller, which that was kind of more like it. And then crossbows. And then I was starting to see some of I couldn't believe these guys were sculpting this stuff out of clay. I mean,
insane,
it's just the craftsmanship down there was insane. And then, you know, you're kind of looking at these, again, trying to imagine what it's going to look like on our orc, and not some dude in a pair of Levi's. But, you know, there's Charlie. That's Charlie on the left up there. I know he looks menacing, but he was a really nice guy. And there's Martin, Martin Petch. So this was at the costume fitting. So we were over in Ukraine, and this is the kind of the last chance. Once they build the costumes, and they've built the costumes around our actors, but obviously our actors can't hang about in Prague for 8 weeks whilst they make costumes. So they go back home to the UK, and Martin and his team continually construct these outfits, the wardrobe. Then we bring our actors back over for a final fitting, and that's always, again, it's kind of a moment of realization whether something's going to work or not.
Right.
Ash started putting this stuff on, and we realized pretty early on that he wasn't going to be able to move at all, apart from walk, because he had chainmail, even though it was fake chainmail, then armor, then another piece of like a tunic, I guess, then the breastplate, then the shoulder pads, then the gauntlets, and you've just got layers and layers and layers of stuff on top of your stunt guy, who's going to needs to be causing absolute mayhem and havoc. So then you have to start getting smart about, right, let's chop the chainmail off at the sleeves, sew that to the interior of the thing that it's joining to, so that then you start to strip away layers, so that then Ash can start to move more freely. We made some augmentation to the breastplate. There was the knee pads had to be changed a little bit. It was the same for Spencer's armor. Spencer put the armor on and literally just started walking full pace through the workshop, scaring the life out of everybody, because he's got these 2 massive spikes that come off of his shoulders. There's Ash. See these spikes here on his shoulders, and Spencer was loving every minute of this. And we had to make some modifications, because Spencer lifted his arm up and the spike almost went into the side of his head.
Gotta love that fantasy armor.
Well, yeah, these are all things that the team, you don't realize until you get the actor in the suit and then the actor starts doing the moves that they're going to be doing on set. You have to start making these modifications as you go. So they did an amazing job getting all that stuff to work. I mean, again, you're seeing just 2 characters. We did this for 6 people.
Wow.
Then, and again, with the prosthetics and all the rest of it. So this was the photo that I took down on our location scout day. And then this was some of the paint overs. Who was it that did the stuff?
There's a guy called Butch.
Yeah, Butch,
Yeah.
that's right. He did
There was
some
many
great work.
versions
Yeah.
until we got to the final one.
So Butch was taking that photo and doing some cool paint overs, and then we decided on the one that we wanted, the one that was going to work best for us, that sort of had a really cool look. We loved the blades that were sticking out the tower there, and the flags, and just thought this would be the one that would work the best. So then the production design, we went from there. Ricky Ayres was my production designer. So Ricky's a lovely guy. He's from South London as well, East London actually. And Ricky had done a lot of shows of this scale before, so I was really glad we got Ricky, and Ricky's old school. He just started sketching me some elevations from some in-game models that he'd seen, and obviously the stuff that Monolith had supplied. And so the plan really ended up being, we were going to do 3 days on location down in Odessa, and then another 4 days in Kiev, at a studio in Kiev, where rather than doing the whole thing down in Ukraine on location, if you're not familiar with location shoots, they go really slowly, a lot slower compared to studio shoots, because you're dealing with so many variables on set. You throw in bad, like cold weather and things like that into the mix as well. They had to bring the Ukrainian army in to shift snow at one point because it was that deep. Wow. So it was always, the intent was to split the shoot. We were going to do, like I say, 3 days in Odessa, and then 4 days in Kiev. The 4 days in Kiev were going to be, as soon as Talion in the spot enters through the Graug smashes through the gate and Talion is inside the fortress walls, that was in my head. I was like, okay, we can do this, the rest of this on a stage now. I don't need to be outdoors. There's no exterior shots anymore. So that was kind of the reasoning behind it. Give us way more control. We found a set that was drainable in Kiev, so I could bring my rain towers indoors, much to everyone's dismay. I also kept the doors of the studio open because it was minus 25 outside, so that still, when people were speaking or shouting, we would still see the breath on the air. I didn't want that to disappear. I didn't want them to have to, NPC to worry about that in post, because you guys had so many other things to worry about that I thought, look, if I keep the doors open, we get all this shit for free. So again, there was some raised eyebrows at the time, and I remember Craig saying the words to me, "Are you fucking crazy? Everyone's going to get sick." And I was like, we've just all gotten sick down in Odessa. I mean, it's like, if everyone it's going to be the same. I think it'd actually be a little bit warmer inside there than it was where we were before. You know, and there were heaters in there and stuff like that, so people that needed to stay warm could stay warm. But so that was the plan for that. This was I'm a huge fan of this movie called The Keep. It's a Michael Mann movie, and it's a beautiful mess of a film. If you haven't seen it, I urge you to go watch it, because Ricky asked me, he said, what kind of look do you want for the interior, you know? And I said, I want to flood the floor with dry ice and have all these bodies and arrows and shit sticking out off the floor. For a number of reasons. One, I think it looks really cool. Yeah. Two, it would also hide the fact that we were reusing the same 3 walls over and over and over again. The more you can, I think if you could see the floor, your mind would always be able to kind of tell where you are, whereas if you had this misty layer there, and I would always switch bodies around and arrows and stuff like that, we kind of got away with it, you know? Because we were also missing the 4th wall, the wall behind me, because the camera was there. So that was something else we had to be really mindful of, was always cheating that 4th wall, especially when I was doing reverse angles and things like that. So I won't go into the headaches that we had on set trying to work this shit out with Fabian, my wonderful DP. But Ricky would send me these amazing things, these photos, because he took, when we were down doing location scouting, Ricky took photos of the actual real-life fortress walls and had his team basically rebuild it in the same world as the game design. So we started introducing these other elements into the 3-walled set that we obviously didn't have down in Odessa, because trying to build this stuff on location would have just been a nightmare. So the idea was then Vicky's team would take over a lot of that stuff with the set extension on the live action backdrop. And then when we were in our stage, you guys would just be dealing with set extension from 12 feet upwards. And that seemed to work quite well. And then there was some burners that Ricky made and the flags and stuff. I mean, again, it's just a little piece of what we ended up, what Ricky ended up making. So I knew from very early on that I had a really cool stunt team, because Nick, prior to going to Ukraine, got the stunt team together, and they just shot a little fight scene for me based on some of the storyboards that I sent them. It was a bit too long in length, but you can see from this clip I'm about to show you, you just don't get previs like this from people unless they're really, really fucking good. Nick's one of the best in the business, and this previs that he sent me was just awesome.
Keep the wall safe!
So Nick basically shoots this stuff, edits it, and adds sound effects and things like that. And it really, as a director, it's so cool to see that from your stunt coordinator, because it helps you so much. Trying to work all this stuff out on set, I do not recommend it. It's all in the planning and the preparation. And even though I never planned on shooting the fight scene exactly the way Nick shot it or the way Nick cut it, it was still so cool to see the moves come to life. And there were little bits in there that I thought I actually would steal. The bit where Ash, he does this little twirl over his head and you hear the sound effect of something hitting the sword. I said to Ashley, I was like, what were you doing there? And he was like, well, I imagined this arrow coming in and Talion deflects it. And because he does that in game, and I was like, wow, that's fucking cool. I remember he does that in game. So how about we steal that and we put that in the opening shot? And that was something that we pulled from this fight sequence and added it somewhere else. They were just, these guys, to be able to make... So fight sequences are very, very time-consuming things to work out. And when you make adjustments on set, with the wrong team, it can take forever to resolve that adjustment. Whereas with these guys, it would be adjusted within 5 minutes, we'd be shooting again. You really do appreciate the skill when you're working with a team like this, when you can quickly, I can give some direction and it comes back at me within 5 to 10 minutes. This next fight sequence was something we rehearsed. Oh.
Oopsie.
Oh. What's going on?
Mortar! Flame!
Okay, so that was the day before the shoot. Again, that was a scene we blocked out. This was another scene. I just love those sound effects. It's so cool.
They really drive the...
They do.
Yeah.
This was an interesting one because this was for this fight scene where after the Graug smashes through the gate, Talion transforms into Celebrimbor, and Nick had worked out this extremely beautiful, elaborate fight sequence that was about 15 seconds long. And we went through rehearsals, and I was like, we're going to have to cut this down. I mean, it was just too much in there. So this was the day before we were going to shoot this scene. And again, testament to these fellas, they just found a ballroom in the hotel somewhere
ask us, isn't the hotel
after breakfast. And we're like, yeah, let's just throw this together, and we're able to pull this together for the shoot, which was amazing. This was one of the tumble
Background
effects.
and 3, 2, 1, action!
So it looks really easy, but I can tell you it's not. He's tethered by a line, and Ash is having to spin his body perpendicular to the floor whilst rolling in the air over an orc, and he's going to slice another one. That was the fight sequence. It's in one of the extensions. It's in Slay Your Nemesis. So we rehearsed it, but then think about it. Ash is now going to have to do this in costume, in rain, on set, with everybody else, and he pulled it off in the second take, I think it was, which I managed to shoot on my phone on the monitor. If it'll play. Again, just awesome stuff that these guys did. I mean, it's when you're standing there and everything's going, you know, the rain and the lightning boxes and Ash is in character and he does this, you're like, it's kind of hard not to sort of giggle like a little school kid, you know, like.
Yeah.
So this is production.
Back into the main score again now.
Shadow of War is built on a relationship between you, the player, and the orcs that you're going to either have as allies or have as enemies. And whether those orcs are allies and loyal or enemies that will betray you depends on your actions in the game, how you treat them in the game. So what the team wanted to do here was create an experience that put the player into the moment of making that choice and then suffer the consequences of that decision.
Translating the world of the game into live action, prosthetics was one of the things that I wanted to use. There's a keenness to use CG these days, especially for characters, and I think our orcs were so much better when we used prosthetics for that performance to be able to come through.
It takes approximately 3 hours to put on the prosthetics with all the pieces together and then fine-tuning with coloring the eyes and the lips.
There's such scale to this game, and that's really something that I wanted to bring to this spot. We found an amazing fortress down on the shores of the Black Sea in Odessa. Using that as our live-action backdrop, which we're then going to embellish in CG, is going to be epic.
So I looked at the artwork that was done, and I looked at the game itself, and really took it from there, finding a way of translating the video game look towards our real-life shoot.
So we'll be taking all of the in-camera locations, the fortress that we shot at, and building that up into a much bigger fortress that looks like the Warmonger fortress in the game. We'll be bringing the backgrounds to life and making it feel like the location was actually in Middle-earth, adding Mount Doom, adding the storm clouds, as well as all of the extra orcs. The ones that we shot for real are great, close to camera, we can feel that they're there, and then we'll add the scale and scope that makes it feel like there's a whole army behind them.
This game is a lot bigger than the last one, and I think we've done it justice.
So I was hoping you could walk me just through a day on set, how it was like, you know, kind of being there and shooting those scenes.
It's funny you should say that, because I put a little slideshow together.
Well, look at that.
Can you just do me a favour and turn it down a little bit, please? Thank you. So yeah, I don't remember, like, it's kind of interesting. I've just given you everything up to production. I've really got very little footage of me in the shit, because I was busy. It was like,
right.
You know, I don't really remember too much about it, really, other than, you know, I sort of look at photos like this and stories sort of come back to me. But an average day on set, I mean, we'd start 7 in the morning. the actors would be in way before we were.
We got to sleep in for a bit.
Yeah, and then you know, we'd be down on the Black Sea that was frozen over. Charlie eating his lunch. You know, we'd be blocking out shots. We'd have a shot list to get through for the day, and you've got to make those shots no matter what kind of thing. So sometimes we'd finish on time, sometimes we'd finish at 2 o'clock in the morning, and then you have to push crew call the next day so that everyone gets a 10-hour turnaround, I think it is, or something like that. So, you know, you kind of I just took every day as it came, to be perfectly honest. I tried not to think too far ahead. A lot of it at this point becomes instinctual, it really does. There was a moment, I remember, we had a shot to get, and I was losing daylight, and it was the opening shot of the whole spot. So it was a kind of important shot, and I had an hour to get it, you know, and it was basically, you're moving a small army of people across the ice to try and get your shot, you know, and maybe you get 15 minutes of light before the light fell, and that was, we were in darkness, and we got it. So you just kind of have to trust your team and yourself that you'll be able to pull it off, and also sort of, you know, there's moments on set where you have to, I'm not one of these people that, I don't like screaming and shouting. I don't think that gets you anywhere in life. I think that if people are having fun, you'll get, you know, like, you'll just get better work out of everybody, myself included, you know. So I tried to treat every day just like that, like we were making a Lord of the Rings film, you know, like you couldn't wipe the smile off my face most days. But, you know, sometimes you have to apply a little bit of pressure, you know, and you just do that in your own kind of special way. But I have lots of fond memories of that shoot, even though it was probably one of the easily the toughest shoot of my life so far. It was a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
A hell of a lot of fun.
And so you're coming from post. You're a guy who's had a career in kind of post-production. So did that affect the way that you were, you know, handling things on set, or the way that you were shooting things, perhaps? Did that play a role in how you?
Yeah, especially on something like this. You know, I would obviously be very mindful not to tread on Vicky's toes, because, you know, that's why MPC and Vicky were there. Was to you know, make sure the VFX were all going to work, and we weren't shooting stuff. Because I've been on the receiving end of shots that don't work. You know, the films will remain nameless. You know, throughout my career, we've all worked on things, I think, where you look at stuff that could have been shot better. So having that experience of knowing how I would shoot things better, it definitely came into play in this. And that, in combination with knowing the game as well as I did, it definitely created a shorthand. Because, I mean, I remember there was moments where I was like, Talion needs the other sword. He'd be holding his broken sword, and he'd need you know, that orc's got the wrong armor on, or he's holding the wrong, you know, little things like that don't sound big. But when you get into post-production and your client goes, he's holding the wrong sword, you need to paint that out of 100 and God how many frames, and, you know, or, you know, change something that you shot that could have easily been avoided on set. A lot of these things can be so easily avoided if they're just thought about and planned, and, you know. So, yeah, I would think that it does help me. My experience.
It certainly helped us as well, I think. Yeah.
I'm good. I'm glad.
So awesome. I know that here right now tonight we have quite a few Gnomon students here in the audience. So I was wondering if you had any advice to give to them, for any of them who might want to get into directing at some point.
I mean, it's everyone gets into it. I think I got into it in a very different way than some other people. I mean, I think everyone has. I watched this Spielberg documentary the other night. I don't know if anyone's seen it on HBO, but he used to smuggle himself onto set. He used to jump off the tour bus and then go hide in the toilet on some film set and then just pretend he was part of the crew. I mean, I'd love to do that these days. I just think you'd get arrested, wouldn't you? I mean, back then I think things were a bit more lenient, but advice, I mean, just start making stuff now. I mean, there's so many tools that I think at filmmakers' fingertips these days that, you know, you can make short films in your bedroom on your computer, you know. That doesn't prepare you for dealing with a crew, so that would be my other advice, is to interact with as many fellow artists as possible on a daily basis. I think it's very easy for us to spend a lot of time in front of the screen and not interact with with each other, you know. So I think that's really important, to work as, you know, working in teams, because that's really what a lot of directing is about. It's about teamwork, and it's about communication. It's about having a point of view. The last thing people want to hear when they ask you a question on set is, I don't know, or, you know, ask him or whatever. You know, you have to know, you have to have a vision, I think. And the more things you make, the more films you make, the more your vision, I think, will solidify over the years. Yeah, I think that's...
You know, thank you. Yeah, it's awesome. So cool. Now I want to kind of turn the light over to Vicky and ask some questions about just kind of NPC's role in the making of this trailer. So let's start with the kind of beginning of that process with Previs.
Yeah.
So can you kind of walk us through that creation of the Previs and the process that you went through with Neil to plan, you know, the various shots?
Yeah, well, we've touched on that a little bit. You've already seen the Previs for the main spot that we did. It was so crucial to have when we were on set. I think, you know, some shots you saw didn't make it through. We planned new ones on the day. But the ones that did, and the ones that were particularly useful, I thought, were the ones with the big CG creatures that, you know, obviously they don't exist.
Right.
Most of the actors, the stunt guys, they didn't know what they were meant to be interacting with, and it was very, very useful for them to see what the shot was going to look like and see what they were fighting, you know. So that definitely helped, and was, for me, makes it invaluable.
And the extensions as well.
Yeah.
You didn't see the previews for the extensions because they're quite crude. Crude, I wouldn't say crude. They're a lot rougher around the edges than the one we showed you, because there was just so much work to get through. The extensions are like another 2 commercials. I think Slay Your Nemesis is like another 90 seconds. Right. So it was a lot of work. It was, you know, and we had to squeeze it all in 7 days. So Previs really does help you do that. You know, you can start to give that to other members of the team, and they start sort of dissecting it and saying, this is going to take 1 day, and these 5 shots will take another day, and, you know, you start really sort of chopping it up like that.
Yeah.
Definitely, very cool. And so something that's a bit different about this trailer and, you know, kind of this project is the fact that, well, it's a game, right? And so you are going to have, and you guys mentioned that you used a lot of kind of the game assets in the production or in the pre-production of the trailer. So I was kind of wondering if you could talk a bit about just NPC's approach to using in-game assets and turning them into photorealistic characters.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's kind of a little bit like the same process that Neil described in making the, you know, all the orc masks and stuff. I mean, he's put us all in this very realistic world. The game world obviously is not quite the same look, and we're aiming to make this look like a movie. We don't want it to look like a game. So all of those creatures that we got from them, they come with animation cycles and characters, and we can see how they act in the game, we can see their behavior, but we sort of needed to make them...
Is this the one?
This is the one. This is a little run-through of the creatures that we developed. Got to give credit to Monolith, which is where we got a lot of the starting points from. So the orcs you'll see at the beginning, that's pretty much how we used them, and they were used for the fighting sequences, the crowds in the background. But all of the main creatures we sort of developed to look a bit more like real animals. So we tried to make the texture of the skin feel like, say, a rhinoceros or a lizard, or all the sort of creatures that you would see in real life. And again, the movement is something that we spent a lot of time developing to make it feel more realistic. A lot of the game movements are a little... They just wouldn't really sit with all of our live action actors and orcs, and they really had to feel like it was in the same world. So this is just a little run through of the characters. So these are the guys that populated the background. When you see those scenes that feel like there's a whole army there, it was made up of these guys just killing each other. So these cycles came also from Monolith. These ones were all motion captured. And we put all these into a crowd system that generates the whole sort of field full of the creatures. There's lots of them.
I would love to have featured some of these guys a little bit more close to camera, but we just couldn't do it.
So these are the creatures that we worked up in a lot more detail than was in the game. So they were sculpted in ZBrush, textured that way also, and then rigged to be much more realistic than they were in the game. This one obviously breathes fire as well. We just had to elevate them just that little bit more to make them fit with the live action plates that we shot. The run cycles were all reworked to feel more like real cats for this one. Yeah, so they just really needed to feel like they could sit alongside the real people. And
right, and were you guys in constant contact with Monolith, or did they just kind of give you the starting point and you guys took off from there?
I thought there was a starting point, really, but there was a lot of guidelines that went along with that. I mean, they've created this whole world inside the game, so there's definite rules that we had to play by.
Definitely.
We couldn't just run with it in any direction we wanted. It needed to feel like the real world version of the world that's in the game. So we did have a lot of guidelines, but then, the whole process went very well. Everyone was happy.
They're very cool in that respect, though, because, like for Celebrimbor, for example, Celebrimbor in game works in the game world, but if you were to use that, if we were to do a similar effect in post, in our real world Shadow of War, it just wouldn't work.
It wouldn't look good at all, and it would make the whole thing feel maybe a little cheap.
Yeah, so they understand that then you have to take the idea of that and make it work for the live action plate.
Yeah, and can you guys actually talk about that process about bringing Celebrimbor to life?
So that process was actually a little trickier than the creatures, which they felt like a natural process of just lifting the bar a little bit. But like Neil said, the whole effect of him in the game, it's such a big part of the game. It's like the hero, special moves. But it's quite a simple effect, and really what we wanted was something that felt like a movie effect. In fact, the references that Neil gave us were very much like horror film, ghost, aura kind of things, and this was the challenge. We had to try and make him feel like the game and feel like it could be in a movie at the same time.
Yeah, there was the Wraith effect in Lord of the Rings as well is something that, has a specific look, and I think we wanted to kind of reference that a little bit, but not obviously copy it. So that he emits this. I mean, in the Wraith world, there's kind of like he emits these particulates, I guess. Like this energy that comes out of him, this ethereal quality, this ethereal nature. So that was something else that we wanted to make sure that he had.
We've got a little breakdown of the main shot that he appeared in, to show all of the layers that went into making it up. And I think the end effect actually looks very, it looks very premium, very film-like.
Yeah.
But it was actually one of the most time-consuming parts of the whole job.
I'll play that again.
Yeah. So basically what we had to do is take the model of Celebrimbor that originally came from the game assets and work it up in a lot more detail. We decided that we didn't want to make him feel glowy and holographic like he is in the game. So instead we had to sculpt in a lot more detail and have that reality show through. And then on top of that, layer in all the effects on top. And to make it work, we had to match the proportions and the size of the Celebrimbor character exactly to the actor. So the face had to line up over the face, and so in effect, we changed the character to match him a little bit more. And then it has to be animated to exactly match the actor. And so there's a lot of work behind the scenes that goes into this that makes it one of the trickiest parts. But it paid off in the end. I think it came out very well.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. And so I'm guessing, a lot of, a huge part was not only transforming the character, but also transforming the world around him and kind of building that Middle Earth feeling. So can you just kind of talk to us about the process of taking that, location in Ukraine, in Odessa, and transforming it into Middle Earth?
Yes. I mean, you saw from some of the stills that Neil showed of the location. It's a great castle, but it definitely needed a lot of embellishment to make it feel like Middle Earth.
Well, one of the real tough calls was, and it wasn't my call, it was the gods weren't on my side of the day of the shoot. We went down the day before for a run-through, blocking out the shots and just a quick sort of rehearsal. And it was a beautiful grey, diffuse sky. It was really, and there was a little bit of mist in the air, and it actually, you felt like you were in Mordor. And then, lo and behold, the day I wake up for the shoot, and we're in the van on the way to set, and the sun is starting to come out. So, yeah.
That's the worst thing.
It was just one of those things that you just can't control.
Right.
So it just, in the middle of winter in Ukraine, we get 3 sunny days, and they just happen to be on the days that I'm shooting, It's kind of one of those things that you can't think about too much.
Right.
Yeah, and that was particularly bad, just because a lot of the shots we shot in the daytime, but actually we had to make them all look like it was dusk or getting towards nighttime, so it can be a challenge to get rid of shadows and highlights and that kind of thing. But
we made sure if we kept the actors in shadow, that was kind of the plan, wasn't it? As long as the highlights didn't hit them, we figured we'd be okay. If we were just patching ground and sky, that was still a lot of work. But
it was good.
Not as much work as it would have been as if we were painting highlights off of people's faces and things like that. I couldn't imagine even beginning work like that.
Right. And so do you have some breakdowns that you can show us about the process of turning that set into
well, there's a general breakdown here that covers quite a lot of shots, and within that you can kind of see what the shots look like before and afterwards. You can see the extent of the work. I'll just play that through first. There's really quite a lot of this one. So that was the shot started off, and lots of layers that went into it. So it's basically an icy lake, or the sea. The sea was frozen. And the matte paintings for the sky, and the castle was actually all built out in 3D. This shot was completely CG, which was, that kind of got put in there halfway through the job. So this was the castle that we built up. This is the shot that we've just seen. And there's a lot of grading work that goes into this that really sets the look as well. I mean, we added an awful lot of CG to it, but once a good colorist has got their hands on it and made it feel in the world that we wanted it, it makes a huge difference.
Wonderful Jean Clement graded this for us. He's one of the top colorists in the world.
Yeah, so this is an example of the set, the three-walled set that Neil mentioned, that we sometimes had to extend. We pretty much recreated this whole shot, actually. Yeah. It was easier than extending it in the end. Yeah. So. Wow. But yeah, there's... I'll try and go back to some of the moments just to illustrate the fortress. There we go. So this is basically what it looked like when we shot on set. There's lots of work to do. And we just put in the castle, we put in all of the orcs, the matte painting for the sky. Same here with the lake. So really, it was quite extensive. I think the set extension and the development of the world is almost like another beast of a character, really. The exteriors were where the bulk of the work was, because we had to create the whole castle as well as all the army of orcs. But even the interiors, there was a little bit to do as well. And the final shot with the drake that flies up, we actually ended up replacing the whole courtyard for that one.
So we shot that on a drone. But yeah, sometimes it just doesn't work, what you shot, so you just end up having to rebuild it all in CG anyway.
I mean, we definitely used all of that, but we got to a point where we built so much interesting fortress that we sort of embellished it even more, and it gives you a little bit more freedom to control the size and the shot and the animation, make it a bit more dramatic.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And how was your experience? I know you were on set, so how was your experience being on set?
Oh, it was incredible. I mean, like Neil said, it's definitely one of the toughest shoots I've ever done. It was certainly the coldest, and probably one of the longest, actually, for a commercial. It was a lot longer. It was 7 days in the end, right?
It was 7, yeah.
It's much longer than the average, but it was very ambitious. And also the caliber of the rest of the crew that were there that Neil had chosen were incredible. They were as good as he said they were.
I couldn't have done it without them, yeah. It was, I remember sitting there in the pre-production meeting on the day before the first day of the shoot, and you generally have a pre-pro meeting before you embark on this huge job. And I remember telling everybody I should really be shitting myself right now, with nerves. But I was actually really excited to start shooting because everybody in the room was doing such an amazing job. So I just felt completely supported. For something of this scale, that was so important.
That's incredible, yeah. Do you have some more stuff you wanna show us?
Let me see. I've shown you most of it, I think. There's lots of breakdowns. I think I might have shown you everything, actually. We can linger on some of them a little bit more. Maybe I'll play the breakdown through one more time, because it's very... just go by quickly, the breakdowns. I can talk through some of the shots again. So this is the main one that we've already talked about. We actually captured the model for the castle using a drone. We flew a camera over the top of it and constructed some really good photogrammetry from some models from the photogrammetry, which worked incredibly well. And then we built on top of that with the CG castle. Yeah, this one's an interesting one. So, so
Yeah.
this shot actually was never existed in the original boards. It's not something that that was planned to be in there, but I mean, partway through the job, I think it didn't.
I think there was always an appetite from everybody to have a super wide, big, epic shot in there that was even wider than the opening shot. You know, something that shows the real scale of the fortress. But I just don't think we could make the numbers work. You know, so but then it came up again later in conversation. So so then it was down to MPC to work out how to pull this off with us not. We'd shot a lot of information on set, but we never really shot anything that was supposed to be this.
No, and I think what happened was because we developed the castle in such a thorough way, we actually don't see it very much in the opening shots. So we actually had a castle that we built that was worth showing off as well. So in the end, it wasn't such a bad thing. Again, we'd already built the armies for the earlier shots. We just didn't see them from this angle. So even though it was a bit more work, I feel it did show off a little bit more of the work that we'd put in.
Yeah.
And it certainly helped with the story, I think, and the scale of the whole place.
Definitely, yeah.
So it was all built, even all the landscape as well.
It's an incredible shot.
And then lots of matte painting in the background and smokestacks. Lots of great compositing work in this job as well, by the way. It's I haven't really talked so much about that side of things, but there was awful lot of amazing compositing done by the team on the job.
I think if we'd known about this earlier, like way earlier in the job, I would have at least explored the idea of doing some of this with a miniature. I think that would have been really fucking fun.
That would have been amazing.
You know what I mean? Like, because you see, again, you go back to that first Lord of the Rings film, and I think, and again, I wouldn't do the whole shot with a miniature, but we could at least use some of it,
like a base.
Yeah, you know, and then extend on that with CG. I think you get something really very realistic that way.
And I think, you've captured kind of that essence, you know, of that, you know, with all the prosthetics, obviously, and all the, you know, the props and everything. So, yeah, miniatures would have been crazy.
Yeah. And then a few more. So we've seen this one. So this was an interesting one, the Graug shots as well, you know, that we never had a gate on the real castle. The gate was kind of like a made-up thing that came from the game, you know. It was really part of the castle, the fortress that was there, the warmonger fortress that we were meant to create. So all of this, again, was designed from assets. The shields, the banners, all came from the game.
It does look cool.
Yeah, I mean, the Graug,
The slide.
yeah, things like, this is how they kind of put a bit more reality into them. It's things like the eyes and the mouth and the saliva dripping out of it, and the stuff that you just don't get to see in the game. That's the bit that we wanted to put in to bring it more to life. This was an interesting one. Everyone's giggling at the man in the green suit. Let me try and stop on the green suit.
Luke. That's Luke.
There we go.
Yeah.
He could not wait to get in that green suit.
We were taking the piss out of him all day as well. He's like standing around, you know, in this green leotard, and all of us were just ribbing him something wrong. It was so funny, but it was. I think it really helped with the impact that
it was
you can't,
essential.
as an actor. I don't know how you pretend to be hit by something of that size, really.
You can't.
You really can't.
Yeah.
It just doesn't look right. So if you swing a person at another person,
yeah,
you're
we
real
did,
close.
you're getting in the, you're at least getting in the ballpark.
Right,
you know?
right.
Yeah. But this was another example of where the previs really helped, actually. These shots where the creatures that don't exist had to interact with the real actors, and then so the choreography for this was kind of already planned out, and you could see what needed to happen. And like Neil said, everyone was so responsive. saw the previs, saw what they needed to do, made it happen. You know, this is exactly that. And this is another one where we had to extend the set a little bit as well.
Yeah.
And add
I
the
did try and
atmospherics.
avoid angles like that.
It was the only, yeah, there wasn't too many. It was very
wasn't.
good. And then in general, really, the set was great for this. All we really did was add some rain, atmosphere, any extensions that we needed, as well as the CG creatures. It's a good example, actually, as well, of how much the grade makes a difference. I mean, the wipes in the beginning of these shots here are between the ungraded footage, which is when it comes in raw, and what we did with the grade was just, it changes the whole look completely. Obviously, there's lots of more bespoke compositing on top of that as well.
Little flares and things.
Yeah, but it just makes such a huge difference.
See, going back to the practical, you go back to that shot of Spencer screaming, the one where he's no, it's the
oh, with the tonsil.
Yeah, yeah. See his tonsils. Can you imagine trying to do that in CG? It's right at the back of his throat there. You see his little tonsil dangling and wiggling about.
Yeah.
It's like you get that for free.
Right.
Yeah. You know? So that was another. You know, that's for me. That's why I love practice, especially with characters like this. It just you get all of that stuff.
Definitely.
You know, just makes it look so much more real. Because I know if I was on the receiving end of a CG shot like that, it'd be like, just make his mouth black.
Black, right.
We don't see anything in there, you know, no teeth, no saliva. It's like, it's, you know, I love practical effects in that way.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It was a great idea for this job as well, because I mean, the scope of what we had to do anyway was insane, and it just wouldn't have been feasible if we had to. There's nothing left.
No.
To shoot.
Yeah, maybe a couple of shots of some CG orcs, and that would have been over, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just knowing where to use NPC's firepower. You know, I think is what, you know, when you guys start going out there and making your own things, is knowing where to use these amazing tools in the right way. I think is the key to making good-looking stuff, you know, and that was again something from the outset that I really loved the idea of, is not knowing where the live action ends and the CG begins. A lot of people look at this and they're like, you know, they can see that there's dragons don't exist, and you know, and Graugs don't exist, and things like that, but they really they really can't, you know, they can't see the seams. So that was always part of the plan, you know, is to not really know. I think these days you can really tell if something's shot on green screen, or, you know, I like the idea of building practical things that you interact with and then just extending that out, you know.
Definitely. Yeah. So very cool, guys. Thank you so much. I want to open now the floor to questions, but first, just a big round of applause for all these guys. All right, so questions. This one in the back, all the way over there.
Okay, I'll bring the mic to you.
Hi there. So my question is for Vicky. How big was the team at NPC working on this as far as the artists? And the other question is, where was the work? Was the work being done in Vancouver, or was it being done mostly in London? You know.
Neither, actually. It was actually mostly done in New York. We also have an office there. And so we ran the bulk of the work there, but it was a big team. There was, obviously it varies across the job, depending on which stage we're at, but there's probably a minimum of at least 10 at all times. But we did actually work across different sites. We had people in LA, the LA office, in the London office, in the Bangalore office. They were all helping to pull this one off. It was a huge task. I'd say it probably varied from a handful up to maybe at any one time. There's probably up to 20 during the biggest part of the job, but it definitely ebbed and flowed throughout the process.
Cool. All right.
Thank you, Vicky. Okay,
Got one
running
over here.
around here. Was it you?
Question is regarding the swords and weaponry. You mentioned something about 3D printing them. Is that what you did for that? Did you print them?
He's asking about the orc swords and the 3D printing process.
Yes, yeah, they not for every single weapon, but for the background weapons, stuff that wasn't seen close to camera. Yeah, that was they 3D printed. Whether they printed them as entire pieces or they printed parts separately and then glued them together, I know that there was definitely some printing going on. Yeah.
Thank you, Neil. Any more questions here on the stage? On the other side? Just want to make me run around.
My question is about the frame ratio. Why did you choose to go that wide, even wider than the usual 240?
I think it just looks so much more cinematic. I love 240, you know, and very rarely in commercials do you get to use this aspect, especially in video games. A lot of video game clients love 16:9. They think that, and I've had this conversation with some people, they think the black bars, they're actually losing information. They want the real estate, and I think it's a personal preference. Me personally, I love what, you know, 240.
Yeah, if we were trying to fight for that too, I think.
I mean, and it's nice that everybody on the team. It was from the outset as well. I think I said it in the pitch. I want to do this. This needs to be anamorphic and it needs to be 240. I think, you know, it just looks so much more epic that way. And everybody agreed, which I was like, oh, I never brought it up again. I just made sure that it happened, you know.
But it's even wider.
Huh?
It's even wider than the usual way it's green, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the widest we would go.
Yeah, I think it's 240.
He's saying no.
My storyboard artist is arguing with me. We shall see about this, Richard.
All right, any other questions? Over here, we got two.
I'm going to sneak down here.
Hi, Neil. Hi, Vicky. First of all, thank you. I'm really nervous. I'm surrounded by a lot of very talented people, and as a person who's been doing practical work my entire life, what you're doing is really inspiring. I guess the only question I have is, what line do I stand in so I can do the model?
Say that again, sorry.
I didn't quite work it out.
What line do I get into so I can do the model for your next?
So what is it you do?
I'm a practical sculptor.
Oh, cool. Well, yeah, I mean, if you're a sculptor, I mean, I would just contact, there's a ton of shops in the valley.
Oh, I work with a lot of them.
Oh, okay, well, there you go.
No, I'm just trying to transition into digital.
Oh,
and
into digital.
It's really an interesting process, and seeing you combine the two, is my fantasy. And actually, here's a good question. From your perspective, do you see more work being produced in this vision of combining reality and digital? Is the trend swinging that way?
I'm not sure. I think there's certain directors out there that do it really well, and then you go and see at some movies and you're like, oh dear, you know, they kind of got the ratio wrong. I mean, obviously no one sets out to make a bad film. I just think that there's decisions that you make along the way that just obviously affect how this thing looks. But you know, I mean, Christopher Nolan is a guy off the top of my head who does this beautifully every single film that he does. He uses practical and CG in a way that you can't tell where one ends and one begins. So, you know, his films to me are always such a benchmark in that regard, I think. And you know, it's hard to think of somebody out there else that's doing it quite as good as him, really, and his team.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And there's another question right here.
Hi, my name is Dante. I'm a filmmaker focusing mainly on directing and producing. And my question is for both of you, can you guys tell us about your journey to where you are now in your career? Like after high school or after college, you know, what did you guys do? What sort of scenarios did you have to go through, you know, to make a name for yourselves?
Well,
you know?
mine's quite quick in that I was quite a reprobate in my early 20s, and if it wasn't for my father actually telling me to get to university and stop being a menace to society, that he was going to have a good talking to with me. And my dad is built like a brick shithouse. As in, he's a big man, but he works at the Tate Gallery, used to work at the Tate Gallery by day and was a nightclub doorman by night, which is quite an interesting contrast there. And he's a man you want to listen to. So that was what really made me go to university. And then that's where I first learned how to use a computer, really. And then fast forward to graduation, I made a short film about bouncers in South London and drug abuse and things like that, which was really quite a personal story to me. And I remember people coming out the screening crying. I thought it was because they really hated it and it was shit, but they really were quite moved by it. So that was my first experience of affecting people with my art, I guess you'd call it, and that's what gave me the buzz to make films. But getting into making movies from graduating at university, I mean, it was a closed door network in London. I couldn't work out how to get into it, so it was always kind of a plan to get into post. I thought if I learned post-production, that would only inform me as a filmmaker as I grew up, because I could see that computers and CG were going to be something that everyone was going to be using at some point. And I thought that would be really cool for me to know that, and then somehow make that sidestep into directing. And I got the shot when it was after working on Avatar, I got the shot to work at Digital Domain. This was years ago, 2010, and they had a little production arm called Mothership, and a video game job came in one day that didn't have a director attached to it, and they said, did I want to direct it? And I said, absolutely, and that was it. So that's how I got into doing it.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, it was for both.
I kind of studied this subject only sort of as a bit of an afterthought, actually, as a master's, and then started working in London also at MPC, actually, and really just worked my way up that way. It was always a world that I didn't really know about until I got the job, and then it was just a great learning process, you know, learning first going on set, which is incredible. You know, it's so exciting when you first do it. I mean, it still is. It remains exciting still. But that's the bit that really reeled me in. I mean, I love creating the work as well, and I have gradually got to do that on larger and larger projects and run bigger things. But that was always the bit for me that made it feel really exciting. The bit where you got to go on set and, you know, be around the shooting. So yeah, I kind of just worked my way up in a post-production visual effects company, starting with the small things and moving their way up to leading jobs and then leading jobs of this size and running a whole department. It kind of just happened gradually over time.
Purposefully?
Purposefully,
Yeah.
Definitely. It wasn't accidental,
Yeah.
but it did gradually build though.
That's very awesome. Any other questions, guys?
Any other questions? I was wondering, Vicky, so obviously you're the head of CG at MPC, and we have a ton of students over here at the front.
That's true. Yes,
What kind of advice can you give to these guys that may want to work on projects like this?
Okay, well, so I obviously look at a lot of people that are trying to get into the industry. One thing that always sticks out to me is it's great to have a good all-round knowledge of what everyone does, but you should really try and hone one skill to perfection, and that should be your aim. I think it's very good to be able to understand what you do in the pipeline, how it has an effect on all of the other things, but really just hone that one thing so it's really exceptional. And that's what I would really like to look out for the most. Just become a master. I'd rather see quality over quantity, like just show me one really great thing rather than 10 things that you never really quite managed to pull off. I think that's a good thing to live by in general.
Yeah, awesome. Have you guys worked together before, or is this your first project?
It's the first one.
First of many.
Yay, awesome.
There we go.
That's pretty much the end of tonight's event. So we'll draw the winners of the prizes. Should we have a big round of applause?